All right, let's dig into savings and investing. This is a fun one. This is where you start to build wealth and see the benefits of all your hard work. So you could think of savings generally as that gap between the money coming in and the money going out. We'll touch on investing, which is more about what you do with that money to make it work for you. Again, you want to start with your goals here. What is the point of saving for you? Are there short-term things you're trying to save for, like a down payment for a house, for example? Are there longer-term goals, like making sure you start investing in a retirement fund early on? Are you looking to pay off debt? Are you setting up that emergency fund, of course, first? Or are there goals that are more in between or more general, like you want to save enough so that you're financially independent as soon as possible? What is the point of savings for you? So it typically, again, typically makes sense to start with that emergency fund at whatever level of emergency fund you feel comfortable. And typically you want to put your emergency fund somewhere where you can access it quickly, but maybe not so easily. In other words, if you had an emergency situation, you'd want to be able to quickly get access to that emergency fund, but you may not want to put it somewhere where you might be tempted to pull from it and spend it too easily. So you want to balance those competing interests a bit. So next, after that emergency fund, which we've talked about, if your employer has a tax advantage retirement plan, like a 401k or 403b, and if you can afford it, it typically makes sense to start by grabbing your employer match, if there is one. We'll talk about that because it's free money in a way, right? It's money for your retirement. So let's talk about that, what that means. We'll talk about what the tax advantage part means based in a basic level in a moment. But again, 401k, 403b, not a lot of magic to those numbers, just where those tax rules are located. But again, when you think about how much money to put into these retirement plans, you usually want to at least get your employer match, again, because that's free money in a way. So in other words, if your employer says, hey, it's usually phrased as a percentage of your contribution up to a cap. So, hey, I will match 100% of the money that you put in up to 5% of your salary. So for example, if you had $100,000 salary, 5% of that is $5,000. They're saying however much money you put in, we will put in the same amount up to 5% or $5,000. So if you put in 3,000, they'll put in 3,000. If you put in 5,000, they'll put in 5,000 as well. And of course, if you put in more than 5,000, that will get invested, but they will not match beyond that cap that they have set. So if you put in 5,000 and they put in 5,000, now you have twice as much money in there working for you. So you put in money, they put in money. It's free money, sort of, as you can see, that they're putting in for you. So let's talk about how this works. So sometimes people think, well, I don't know that I can afford to put that much in, because they imagine, let's say you're thinking about putting away $300 a paycheck to get the match, just to make up a number, and we'll use easy math here. Some people are tempted to think, well, I don't know that I can have my paycheck be $300 smaller, so I don't think I can afford to do that. And that's a bit of a misconception that we should correct so that you don't miss an opportunity here. So let's look at how this works. If you want to write it down as I'm talking through, so you can sort of see how it works, but we're going to use very easy math. We're going to use a 20% tax rate just to keep it easy. It doesn't mean this is the accurate tax rate. It's not quite for this amount of paycheck I'm going to mention. I'm just using this as because the numbers are easy. So it's easy to see mechanically what's happening. All right. So with that limitation, let's assume you have a $300,000 paycheck, right? And you have a 20% tax rate. So $3,000 times 20%, you would be paying $600 in taxes. Again, $3,000 times 20% in taxes, you pay $600 in taxes, which would be withheld from your paycheck by your employer. So your take-home paycheck, again, to keep the numbers easy, would be the $3,000 minus the $600. So $2,400 in take-home pay. Okay. Now let's say instead you have that same $3,000 paycheck, but you want to put away $300 in your 401k. Let's just say that's the amount you need to get your match. What happens here, this is the tax advantage part, is we're now putting away that $300. So 3,000 minus 300. There's $2,700 left here. That's the amount we're taxing you on, right? So before we taxed you on 3,000, that was 600, took that away. You had $2,400 in take home pay. Now we're reducing your pay from 3,000 to 2,700. And we're putting that 300 that we took away into your retirement fund. Now we have $2,700 left. Now that 2,700, not the full 3,000, is the amount we're going to tax. So 2,700 times that 20% is now $540 in taxes. All right, so if you're following, we're starting with the $3,000. We took away the $300 and put it in your retirement fund. And now we're going to take away the $540 in taxes. So 3,000 minus the $300 in savings. I'm just repeating so you can follow, is our 2,700. Then we take away the $540 in taxes, and we're now left with 2,160 in take home pay. So when you didn't put anything away into retirement in our scenario, you had $2,400 in take home pay. When you did put away 300 in your 401k, and then were taxed, you were ultimately left with 2,160 in take home and pay. All right. In other words, your take home pay went down 2,400 minus 2,160, right? 2,400 minus 2,160, right? Again, I'll keep repeating so you can follow, is $240. So your take home pay went down $240, but $300 went into your retirement fund. Right. So because, in other words, you're not paying tax on that amount right now. You'll pay a tax on that later when you're using that retirement fund. But for the time being, it only cost you a difference of $240 in your take home pay to put away $300. Right. In other words, if you go into it thinking my take home pay is going to go down by $300, right? That's not quite right. Your take home pay will go down generally by less than you will end up going in your retirement fund. So how can you actually figure this out then? Well, there are a few ways to figure this out, right? One is you can try to look at the tax brackets and crunch the numbers yourself. Another is you can go to the person at your employer, whether it's an internal or external person. You can find that out and say, hey, I'm thinking about making these changes to my contributions. Could you run the calculation, or could they can sometimes run sort of a fake paycheck and let me know what the result would be, right? They can crunch the numbers on what that would look like for you. Another option is there are third-party websites that have what's called a Paycheck Calculator, where you could put in this information and crunch the numbers using one of those calculators to get a rough sense. If you use a reputable one from a reputable financial institution, they may not be exactly right to the dollar. They may make a little bit different assumptions or rounding or round in a bit of a different way, but they usually give you a good sense of what it's going to cost for you to put this money away, right? So you want to run the numbers and figure out what works for you. But otherwise, it's generally a good idea to get that match so you're not missing out on free money, so to speak. And from there are other options. So you may decide that you want to keep investing beyond the amount of the match, right? So because this is a tax advantage plan, there is an ultimate cap, right, that the IRS will set each year that says how much you can put in a tax advantage retirement fund like this every year. So there will be an ultimate cap, typically not that you can put your whole salary in there, even if you wanted to. But if you would like to put money there that's in between the amount of the employer match and the usually higher cap set by the IRS, if you decide that this is a good place to put that, that's up to you. From there are other options too after the match, and it can get complicated. So Roth Iras, for example, work for some people as a next step, right? And you can learn about these things bit by bit. In other words, if you learn as you get to this point, but start with these basics, and as you're ready, you can learn about next options, right? So as you move through, okay, I've paid down the debt I want to pay down, I've established my emergency fund, I've tackled the match. Now I'm ready to see what's next if I have money left after that. You can learn as you go along, right? And you can keep learning over time as your financial situation and needs change. And then it can be less intimidating to do that more just in time learning, which can keep you motivated to keep going. And again, we'll have money information on money resources in the resources section as well. The other thing you might bump into is a Roth 401k. So a Roth 401k looks a little bit different. We actually put the money in after taxes. And so you're taxed now, but then not taxed later at retirement. So sort of the other way around from a 401k. Some, but not all employers offer this. It may be something that's worth looking into if you do happen to work for an employer that has this, but not as common as the 401k. Okay, so now let's think about, we're starting to think more about investing, right? And often the tax advantage retirement account to the extent of the match is the first place that will make sense for a lot of people. So at first, your money might just be going to a savings account and then into the employer match. And then investing beyond that, your goals are going to be key here again, right? If you have a short-term plan for your money that you're saving for, then you might not want to put it in a longer term investment where it's hard to pull it out or where you might lose money in the short term, right? So your goals should inform what you're doing here. So let's say, for example, you want to be financially independent and retire early, right? Let's say that matters to you. You want to have the option of not working as soon as possible. So just saving the excess from your paycheck is usually, generally speaking, only going to get you so far down the road towards that goal, unless you have a huge law firm paycheck and are keeping your expenses low, which is possible. Just putting cash in a low interest account is not usually going to get you there quickly. Investing in things that make you money while your investment is just sitting there acquiring is different, right? Acquiring assets that make money for you is different. So this can look many different ways depending upon what works for you. There's a lot of variety. Maybe it's real estate. Maybe it's buying a business or investing in a business that you can do somewhat passively. Maybe it's investing in the market, especially over a longer period of time. Again, it depends on your goals. The key is to shift your thinking about what money can do for you from just putting money into a savings account to putting your money to work for you in a different way. Again, after you have the emergency fund, and the amount that you feel comfortable having in savings. So I'll plant that seed for now, right? Some of the resources that I'll share with you at the end will let you explore those ideas further. So if you're interested in something like more traditional investing, or if it's for you, you're interested in real estate or financial independence, right? Or starting a business, you can start to explore those financial options and what works for you a bit more. Again, so many things you can invest in. As a general rule, you typically don't want to invest in something unless you really know what you're doing and you know that type of investment well, right? Some people make a lot of money investing in really unique things, but that often requires knowing that unique type of investment really well to make it work for you. If you are not interested in knowing an investment at that level, then usually diversifying is a good way to go, right? So if you look at something like an index fund or other diversified options, like a diversified ETF, which is a really popular choice at the moment, that may be a better choice for you, right? And you can even manage some of those on your own, right? So you can follow the market a bit instead of picking and choosing where you don't have the time or desire to develop a huge amount of knowledge on a specific investment. Again, there will be more in the resources section when you're ready to act on all this so that you can learn more, but just think about these concepts to get started so you have a general sense. But again, always think about your goals, always start there and then move forward.